Hello, and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this time out we're tackling Gates of Death, written by Charlie Higson with art by Vlado Krizan, first released in 2018, which, according to my internal clock, was last week, but according to the calendar was 8 years ago. This episode is being recorded at the new and improved Doom Industries mobile studio, so hopefully the sound quality will be a little better than last time. Gates of Death was Charlie Higson's first and so far only book for the series, but he is an experienced writer and performer, perhaps best known to those of us who grew up in the 90s as one of the core cast of The Fast Show, the high-speed, catchphrase-heavy sketch show conceived by Paul Whitehouse and Charlie Higson himself. He also worked with Harry Enfield, Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer, and went on to have a successful career as a writer and performer. He's been on Richard Osman's House of Games, which is a very specific level of UK fame. Famous enough that you might have heard of him, but not so famous that 5 episodes of a light entertainment show is money he's going to turn down. As well as his work in TV, he's also a children's author, having done a series of post-apocalyptic novels and 5 books about James Bond's time at Eton. He's also a fan of the fighting fantasy series of long standing, so there's plenty of encouraging signs that this might be an interesting read. This book was a gift from my ex-wife, who is a lovely person who spotted it in a charity shop when we were having a nice day out in York a couple of years ago. My thanks to her for this and many other kindnesses over the years. The art is once again by Vlado Krizan, and I'm duty-bound to say it's not a style I particularly like for this kind of book, being too cartoony for my tastes. I'm not going to harp on about it, but it is what it is. I will try and look for the positives when I'm doing the recording. This is another book where the cover art is reduced to a small circle in the middle, but it's plenty intriguing, since it shows a vampire woman with a very spiky hat surrounded by glowing green gas. Let's take a look at the rules. We are in classic fighting fantasy territory here with a couple of very small but interesting tweaks. You've got skill, stamina and luck all present and correct, but we're very short on equipment, given that we're apparently not a warrior, but an acolyte clad only in a travelling robe without even a weapon to call our own. This brings in the rules for unarmed combat, which here mean that you must fight while reducing your attack strength by 2 and dealing only a single point of damage each time you win an attack round. Once you find a weapon, things will improve, but there's actually quite the list of weapons to find in this book, everything from a cudgel to a harpoon. Most of them are standard weapons, but some have a little special rule attached. The cudgel, for instance, allows you to fight with your normal attack strength, and usually deals 2 points of damage, as usual. But if you roll a double when rolling to attack, it'll only deal a single point of damage. This is a nice way of representing it as a bit less lethal than a sword, but still much better than using your fists. The heavy woodsman's axe, on the other hand, will deal 3 points of damage when you roll a double for your attack strength. It's a lovely, simple system that once again highlights just how flexible the fighting fantasy system is. We don't start with any provisions, much to the chagrin of those of you who enjoy a running gag, but the rules are much as usual, save that you may only eat 1 portion of provisions at a time. What that precisely means is open to interpretation, but my assumption is that you can only eat 1 portion of provisions per paragraph. This is a little more realistic than eating 4 days' worth of meals at one sitting to heal yourself after a Barney, and I think it's a change I like, though it is probably a little harder to balance. The text also makes mention of jars of healing ointment. Like provisions, these restore 4 stamina points, and like provisions, you can only use 1 at once, but it does mean that if you combine them with a meal, you can regain 8 stamina points in a single section by eating a cheese and saffron sandwich. I actually really like the idea of having these 2 sources of healing that can be combined. It adds very little complexity, but it does mean that having 1 pack of provisions and 1 healing salve is strictly better than having either 2 provisions or 2 jars of healing salve. I really like how the author has done some very small tweaks to the rules which nonetheless make the systems feel different, and in both cases the changes add to a sense of immersion rather than taking away from it. This is very encouraging stuff. I have rolled up a character who I have decided to call Fidget Kerfuffle, because that sounds like a suitably heroic name to me. They have an impressive skill of 12, an equally impressive skill of 21, and a rather less impressive luck of 8. Let's hope there's not too many test your luck or die moments in the early game. With all that out of the way, let's play Gates of Death. The Crucible Isles lie in the southern stretches of the Great Western Ocean, shrouded in mist and ringed by dangerous rocks. Few outsiders venture here, but those that do are welcomed by the ancient guardians of the Crucible and taught the healing arts. In time, they will learn how to create magic potions in the giant stone crucible that gives the islands their name. If they have the skill, they might attain the level of Guardian, dedicated to tending the Great Crucible. So there is actually a map, and we are in Alanzia. It's the standard map of Alanzia for the later books, very nicely rendered by Leo Hartas. I can't see the Crucible Isles anywhere on the map, which is a shame. But, it's a map that shows Port Blacksand, the River Chalice, Trollteeth Pass, Icefinger Mountains, Firetop Mountain. All of your classic bits of Alanzia are very much present and correct. The islands are quiet, and very little happens here, but one day the calm is broken by the arrival of a desperate messenger from Alanzia. "I bring terrible news," he says when he is taken to the great High Guardian of the Chapter Hall. "A plague has broken out in Alanzia. People are struck down by the sickness. They are turning into hideous, demonic monsters." "So," says the great High Guardian, her face clouded with worry, "the demon plague has returned. If it is allowed to spread, it will eventually infect every inhabitant of Titan. There is a cure, however. Smoke oil distilled from the roots of the Azura lily. We have a small supply here, not enough to cure more than 100 people. But if we were to take some to the Temple of Throth in Alanzia, the High Priestess there might be able to use her magical skills to produce enough to save everyone. There is only one problem. For its own protection, the temple is hidden within the invisible city. It is the season of storms and high seas, but there is no time to lose, and so a small band of guardians set sail from the Crucible Isles, headed for Alanzia with 60 vials of smoke oil. You are only a humble acolyte, still learning your skills, but it is your duty to serve Brother Tobin, one of the guardians, and so you travel with him. "We will land in Cainlesh Mar in southwest Alanzia, where the people are famous for their wisdom," Brother Tobin explains, as the Crucible Isles disappear over the horizon. "We are sure that someone there will be able to tell us how to find the invisible city." But the gods have other plans. The seas are dangerous, lashed by tempests and furious winds, infested with pirates and monsters of the deep. When you finally make land in Alanzia, it is not at the peaceful harbour of Cainlesh Mar, but somewhere very different indeed. And that is all of the introduction, which is very efficient, I would say. Once again, the world of Alanzia is in dire peril, and only adventurers can save the day. It's interesting that we start out as an assistant to the main adventurer. That's a nice twist. I do like how quick and efficient this introduction is. It's a nice clear mission. That's always nice, and managing to get things going wrong even before the adventure started is, kind of fascinating. Anyway, let's go on to section 1 proper. You step up onto the gangplank and walk down to the dockside. It feels good to have solid ground beneath your feet after being so long at sea, although you feel wobbly and unstable and are very sick from the voyage. You kneel down intending to kiss dry land, and instead you heave up your last meal onto the cobblestones. Lose 5 stamina points. Stamina now 16. This is something of a problematic start. At least you are alive. You feared you would not survive the voyage. Your tiny fleet was blown way off course, and 6 days ago the last surviving ships were wrecked, and you were flung into the icy ocean. It was only by some miracle that you and Brother Tobin were snared in the nets of a fishing boat whose captain dragged you out of the water and brought you here to Port Blacksand. Of all the people who set off from the Crucible Isles, you and Brother Tobin are the only two left. We are at Blacksand. Hooray, hurrah. Yes, this is the stuff we want. I'll be fascinated to see what Charlie Higson makes of Port Blacksand, my favourite place in all of fighting fantasy. You turn to help your master down the gangplank. Brother Tobin, who is old and bald and stooped, is sick from spending so long in the water after the wreck. His legs shake and he holds out an arm so that you can steady him. "We've made it then," he says, and offers up a prayer of thanks to Throff. He then passes you the last surviving vials of smoke oil for safe keeping. "There are only 10, he says. "Guard them well. I wish we had more, but if we can only get 1 vial to the High Priestess in the Invisible City, we will have succeeded. Now we must get out of Port Blacksand as quickly as possible. This does not look like a friendly place at all." He's right. The narrow winding streets that lead from the harbour are dark and dirty, with crumbling buildings overhanging them, and in some cases meeting at the top. The dockside is crowded with a variety of unwashed people who look like they're adding to the general stink of rotting fish and sewage that hangs in the air. You see traders and sailors, adventurers, pirates, men for hire, beggars, and shady characters of all types. "We must eat before we do anything else," says Brother Tobin, and you follow your noses away from the wharf and up Catfish Street to the fish market. The market is situated in a busy square where you find a fishwife grilling sardines over hot coals. The smell of her cooking jabs like a knife at your empty belly. As you make your way over to the fishwife, you pass a stall selling fishing equipment, hooks and anchors, nets, belaying pins, and even a couple of whaling harpoons. The fishwife tells you it will be 1 gold piece for a meal. Making sure nobody is looking, you pull out your purse from where it's hidden in the folds of your tunic and count your money. You only have 10 gold pieces, and the price is criminal. But you are desperate to eat. Do you want to pay the woman or refuse the price? So, nice to see that we are opening with an interesting decision, one that highlights just how poor we are. I've noted down I've got 10 gold on my character sheet. I feel as though with 5 stamina points already lost and no provisions or healing, it's important to get some tuck into us as soon as possible, and grilled sardines sounds very nice. So let's pay the woman her exorbitant fee. The fishwife takes your money and you and Brother Tobin share some sardines. Add 2 stamina points, deduct 1 gold piece from your total. Gold now 9, stamina now 18. "Put it away," says Brother Tobin, pushing your hand back inside your tunic. You wonder what the problem is and then see 2 men are arguing nearby. One of them is Heathcote, the captain of the fishing boat that rescued you. He's still dressed in his waterproof, weather-beaten leathers. The other man is a local merchant, wealthy by the look of him, with jewelled rings on his fingers and a large gold medallion hanging from his chest. "You're no better than the thieves and cutthroats who infest this place," Heathcote shouts, grabbing a handful of the merchant's fine silk robes. "The price you're offering me for my catch is robbery, plain and simple." "It's the best price you'll get in Port Blacksand," says the merchant. "Believe me." "I nearly died catching those fish," says Captain Heathcote. "I was warned about this place, but because of the storms it was the only place we could put in." People are starting to gather round, some taking Captain Heathcote's side, some taking the side of the merchant, who is shaking and getting very red in the face. You see that foam is forming around his mouth and his eyes are losing their focus. And then suddenly he snarls and tries to bite Captain Heathcote, who jumps back in surprise. The next moment the merchant bends over double, his back cracking and popping. When he straightens up, you see that the whites of his eyes have gone dark and his teeth appear to have grown bigger and sharper. Even as you watch, his skin turns rough and warty and his fingernails grow into long claws. There are screams as the people back away. "It's the plague!" someone shouts. "The plague has come to Port Blacksand. He has the demon curse." The thing that was once the merchant lashes out with awful strength, sending Captain Heathcote flying. "Stop!" Brother Tobin cries out, raising both hands. I command you to stop. But now the demon merchant has seen him. It turns its dark eyes on him and advances. Before you can do anything, it strikes Brother Tobin down. You see that he has been wounded, but mercifully is still alive. A group of locals draw their weapons, but they hang back scared. If you don't do something fast, the demon is going to attack your master again. Remember, gasps Brother Tobin, our mission is to help the people of Alanzia and rid them of the demon plague. So this is a great opening sequence. We've been told about the demon plague, we've seen the demon plague in action, we've also seen evidence that Port Blacksand is quite dangerous enough and quite evil enough without demon plagues going about turning people into monsters. And we've been reminded that we have a larger mission, and maybe sometimes the needs of the present are less than those of the future. So do we want to try and help? Do we want to try and cure the demon merchant? Do we want to attack the demon merchant? These are fascinating decisions. I've got 10 vials of smoke oil, so I think I'm going to try and use one of those precious vials to try and cure the demon merchant. Oh, I should say there is a picture. I don't care for it, but it is full of action and the demon looks kind of interesting. But yeah, even by Vlado Krizan's standards, this is a cartoonish representation of a demon and an elderly monk. But can't fault it for its visceral action. That side of it is good. You have only 10 vials of smoke oil left, but this is a matter of life or death. If the creature kills Brother Tobin, your mission is over. And perhaps, if you show the locals what you have brought, it will make your job easier. I mean, probably it just means that they'll try and steal the vials of smoke oil. You quickly slip your pack off your shoulder and fumble inside for one of the glass vials. You take it out just in time and throw it at the feet of the demon, where it shatters, releasing a cloud of yellow gas. The demon merchant shrieks, flails its arms, and then collapses, purple smoke streaming from its mouth and its nose. What have we here, then? You turn to see a man dressed in tattered grey robes, a hood shading his face. At least you think it's a man. You glimpse a pair of red, burning eyes, sharp teeth, and reptilian skin under the hood. A demon attacked us, you explain. It was going to kill Brother Tobin. Everyone looks down. There's no demon there, only the merchant, blinking in surprise. Doesn't look like any demon to me, says the strange man, and then his bony hand grips your arm. You'd better come with me, he whispers, and nods to where a unit of the city guard is hurrying over towards the commotion, dressed all in black with black chainmail. They don't like outsiders here, the man explains, especially guardians. You notice that the locals are keeping their distance from the red-eyed man, scared of him. There's still time to make a run for it. You spot a dark alleyway on the far side of the market. Do you want to break away from the man and run towards the alleyway, or do you choose to trust him? Against my better judgment, I think I'm going to choose to trust him. Everyone in this city port is a wrong-un, but sometimes the right wrong-un can really help you out, if that makes any sense, which it doesn't. But I think hopefully you understand what I was getting at. Yeah, we'll try and trust this fellow. You and Brother Tobin follow the strange red-eyed man through the crowd away from the approaching guards. You're careful where you tread. The streets are filthy with rubbish and droppings. Nasty-looking villains of every type hang out on each corner you pass. Cut purses, hired killers looking for work, disgraced minor wizards down on their luck, smugglers selling poison and stolen jewellery. But they all seem wary of the man in the grey robes and leave the three of you alone. Does like a list, it turns out, Charlie Higson. Which is fine. I've no problem with a list when it's nicely done. It's a perfectly reasonable way of adding colour. Brother Tobin is struggling to keep up. He's short of breath, his wound is hurting him, and he's sweating. You let him lean on you as you carry on. Rising above the houses ahead of you are massive walls, and behind them is a forbidding building topped by 2 towers, from the taller of which a standard flaps in the wind showing a dragon and a pirate ship. "You don't want to go anywhere near that place," says the red-eyed man. "That is Lord Azur's palace." You've heard tales of Varek Azur, nightmare tales, and you hope you can leave Port Blacksand without having any dealings with the sinister ex-pirate who rules the city. Soon you come to the Catfish River that runs through the town and is the main source of the great stink that hangs over the place. You see sewage, dead animals and dead fish floating in it, and there, the body of a woman drifting past with 3 rats perched on her back. Nobody else pays it any attention. Your guide stops. You are at a bridge with a row of stakes along either side of it, each one topped with the skull of some monstrous creature. The wind whistles over the bridge and through the skulls, making a sad sighing sound, almost like singing. The man mutters something to himself and leads you down some steps to a hut hidden under the bridge. A sign reads "Keep out," but the man ignores it and goes in. "Oh, we're going to go and see a wizard. A wizard we are going to see. Nicodemus, I think." Once inside the hut, the man locks the door and throws off his grey robes, somehow changing completely. Gone are the red eyes and reptilian skin, and instead, standing before you, is an old man dressed all in white, with long white hair and a long white beard. "Forgive the disguise," he says, getting some jars down from a shelf. "I don't like to show my hand. I try and stay away from other people, but when I heard there was a guardian from the Crucible Isles here with his young acolyte, I had to find you. My name is Nicodemus, and I know what your mission is, to stop the demon plague. It threatens everyone in Alanzia, and it is only a matter of time before it spreads to the rest of Titan. That cannot be allowed to happen. I will help you get your smoke oil to the High Priestess at the Temple of Throth. I cannot come with you, alas, I never leave this place any more, but I have magic potions which will aid you in your quest." He sets the potion jars out in front of you. Each one contains a different coloured liquid. You read the labels and wonder what they might do. "Take these 4, he says. "Any more than that, and there is a risk they will react with each other and destroy you. You can use each one only once. Simply open the bottle and release the magic. Each one is powerful against a different threat, but I cannot tell you which one to use when. You must let the goddess guide your hand." So we have 4 magic potions, thick as thieves, pretty as a picture, collywobbles and dragon's breath. So I think the dragon's breath is presumably going to be some kind of fire potion. Collywobbles, I guess, is going to be a way of making people feel unwell or confused. Pretty as a picture sounds as though it ought to be a means of changing my own appearance. And thick of feet, I'm really not sure what that might involve. Maybe some kind of stealth. So, will I remember any of that when it comes time? Maybe, maybe not, but we will see. As you put the jars in your pack, Nicodemus examines Brother Tobin, who is slumped in a chair, his whole body trembling, his skin turning grey. "The wound is infected," says Nicodemus. "It is only a matter of time before he turns into a demon. You will have to travel alone." You are about to protest when Brother Tobin whispers your name. "Nicodemus is right," he says feebly, gripping your arm. "I don't have the strength to walk another step or to fight the demonic infection. Only you can save Titan. Be brave and pure of heart." "And be quick," says Nicodemus. "The longer you delay, the worse the plague gets. Take Bridge Street to the Market Square and then on to the main gate. From there take the road to Silverton and on to Salamonis. The people of Salamonis are more civilized than the scum who live here, and should be able to tell you how to find the invisible city. Tell no one of your mission until you are there. And here, take my robe. It will get you safely out of town. There its magic ends. After that, you're on your own." He picks up the robe and offers it to you. You smell sulphur coming from it and see a glint in the wizard's eye. Can you trust anyone in this awful place? So you've got a choice of putting on the robe, attacking Nicodemus to get more of his potions, or grabbing Brother Tobin and leaving without putting on the robes. Now, I think if you know you're fighting fantasy, you feel as though attacking Nicodemus is a highway to absolutely nowhere. I suppose it is faintly possible that this could be someone impersonating Nicodemus, but that seems unlikely. He's one of the great powers in Alanzia. Putting on the robe seems like the obvious thing to do. Grabbing a man who's about to turn into a demon and leaving seems very, very unwise. So I think we are going to try and do the obvious thing and see how that turns out. We will put on the robe. Nicodemus holds out his magical robe, but before you can put it on, you hear a cry of pain. Brother Tobin is bent over, clutching his stomach, his bones cracking. Suddenly, he straightens up with a jerk and a snarl, and you can see he has rough, warty skin, and the same horrible dark eyes, long claws and sharp teeth as the possessed merchant. He leaps at you, and is struck down by a beam of light from Nicodemus's outstretched hands. Brother Tobin falls to the floor and dissolves in a cloud of purple smoke. "He would have died anyway," says Nicodemus. "Now be quick, take my robe." You look at what is left of poor Brother Tobin. Do you still want to put on the robe? I mean, I do. You slip on the robe, and Nicodemus shouts something in a language you don't understand. For a moment his hut is filled with light. You realise he must be a very powerful figure, and wonder how he ended up here, underneath the singing bridge by the stinking Catfish River. It is one of the most enduring mysteries in fighting fantasy, precisely what Nicodemus is up to. Is he just hanging out in Black Sand because of Zanzar Bane? Or is there some other reason, perhaps connected to Lord Azur, for one of the most powerful mages in the world to kind of go into secluded retirement in Port Blacksand? There's a shift in the air and you feel different, but you couldn't say exactly how. You leave the hut and are amazed that everyone in town keeps away from you. Halfway up Bridge Street, you catch your reflection in a shop window and see that you have red eyes, sharp teeth, and the skin of a lizard. So that explains it. It takes you no time at all to get to the main gate. As you pass outside the walls, however, there is another shift in the air, and your grey robes turn to dust and fall from your shoulders. You shiver, suddenly cold. Clouds are gathering. Nicodemus can't help you now. He was right, you are truly on your own. So, a nice little Act 1. Again, I would always like to have spent more time in Port Blacksand getting into sticky situations with weird and dangerous people, but I think it's a great way to start the adventure. Feels suitably dangerous and, makes the shape of the quest pretty clear. So it's quite a long way from Port Blacksand to Salamonis, and we're going to have to go to Silverton, did he say? I think he did. So we can travel down the Catfish River to Silverton, but then we're going to have to cross the Windward Plain and potentially get through the Forest of Yore and the Vale of Willow before we reach Salamis itself. The good news is that we're not going close enough to Darkwood Forest to call in at Yaz Tromo's tower. You are outside the city gates. As you walk away from them, you feel something tug at the hem of your tunic. You turn, ready to fight, and see that an old beggar squatting in the dirt has grabbed hold of you. He has a filthy bandage wrapped round his face, covering his eyes and ears, and looks like he hasn't eaten in days. "Magic has got you this far," he says, "but now you have some hard travelling ahead of you. Spare me a gold piece and I'll tell you some secrets." Yeah, I mean, I've still got 9 gold, so I think I can spare 1 gold piece for a mysterious beggar. Now 8. You give the old beggar 1 gold piece and he smiles at you. "My name is Phasilus Astra," he says. "I was once a powerful wizard, but I made the mistake of coming to Port Blacksand, where I discovered I was not as powerful as I thought. Lord Azur doesn't like any competition in his city. He captured me, And then the one who calls himself Lord Azur's eyes struck out my eyes. The one who calls himself Lord Azur's ears pierced my eardrums and made me deaf. And finally, the one who calls himself Lord Azur's mouth cut out my tongue. So now you're wondering, aren't you, how I can hear you and how I can speak to you. But look, my lips don't move. I still have some magic left that Azur couldn't get to. As you've been generous to me, I'll be generous to you. Take this. A fine lady gave it to me. He hands you a small bottle of perfume. It's called Nostalgia, he says. One whiff will instantly take you back to an happier time. Add the Nostalgia perfume to your equipment list. I guess we'll call that a potion. Feels like it might be a limited form of time travel. Then Fazilis offers you something else. Poison antidote, he says, passing you a tin flask. My own recipe. You tuck it into your backpack. Add the poison antidote to your equipment list. He grips your hand tightly. Poison antidote always handy. I see into your heart, he says, and I see you must follow the corpse road, view the magic city from the grey rock known as Mount Mira, and pass through the gates of death if you wish to succeed. Oh, and don't eat too many pies. Now hurry, I've told you all I can. What a helpful old man, and ring the bell because we've had not one, but 2 old men already in this adventure. 3, in fact, if you count the elderly monk that we were supporting in the very beginning of the adventure. So it's been a true bounty of old men, proper fighting fantasy style, pleased to see it. There is a sign beside the road pointing to Silverton. It looks like someone has been using it for target practice. There are several arrows sticking out of it. To get to Salamonis, you'll have to go through Silverton, so you set off down the road, glad to be leaving the hateful city of thieves behind you. You've not gone 100 paces, however, when a gang of highwaymen emerge from some ruined buildings by the side of the road, and the brigands quickly surround you. There are 5 of them, and they are armed to the teeth. In fact, even their teeth are armed. They have sharpened metal plates inside their mouths. 2 of them carry short bows, and the rest have swords. It's a picture of the highwaymen, and they do look like a suitably malodorous and skullduggerous crew. I like the different swords they're wielding, notched, and one of them's broken. It's a characterful depiction of fantasy highwayman. Obviously, the style isn't for me, but I think in conception this is a really nice bit of work. Thought you could get away without paying the toll, did you? Says their leader, his voice muffled by his metal plate. You look like a scruffy beggar, but I'll bet you've got something of value on you. No, we're not completely heartless, though. We'll leave you with a shirt on your back, but we'll have everything else, including your boots. And then, as a show of our appreciation, we'll give you a special gift that will make things a lot easier for you. Do you want to give them all your items and weapons and discover what the special gift is? No, I do not. Do you want to put a fight? Not really. Do you want to run away? Yes, please. You set off running through the tall grass at the side of the road and then jump over a fence into a cornfield. You hear a whizzing noise and turn to see that one of the highwaymen has fired an arrow after you. Test your luck. First luck test of the podcast. I roll a 6, which is below my luck of 8. That's good. Luck now 7. Although honestly, if you're going to fail any luck test, a single arrow is probably the one you want to be taking. The arrow flies past your ear and hits a scarecrow. Thanking Sindlar, the goddess of luck, you run on, using the high corn to keep you hidden. Once you're sure it's safe, you leave the field and join an old herder's track. You make your way down the herder's track. It is raining heavily, and you are soon soaked to the skin. As you trudge on, you grow more and more tired and hungrier. Lose 1 stamina point unless you only have 1 point left, in which case your stamina score remains at 1. Stamina now 17. I like the touch of not having starvation kill you. That's a kindness, because it's a very, very anticlimactic way for a character to die in a game book. So thank you very much for that small kindness, Charlie Higson. The track takes you into some woods, and with the thick branches overhead and the sky heavy with clouds, it gets so dark that before long you are stumbling around with no sense of direction. At last, though, you see a light in the distance and head towards it. You come to a clearing in the woods where a low woodman's cottage stands. It has log walls and wooden shingles on the roof. A dim light shows in one window. Cautiously, you search the surrounding area. You find a small barn and a woodshed full of split logs and old sacks. You go over to the barn and find it locked. Listening at the door, you can hear an animal inside. A horse, maybe? Or perhaps a demon. That's me, by the way, saying perhaps a demon. Now you hear another animal, a wolf, howling somewhere off among the trees. It's too dark and dangerous to risk wandering around out here any longer. You need somewhere safe to sleep. You creep up to the cottage and are about to peer in through the window when you hear a gruff voice from inside. "I know you're out there," it shouts. "I'll warn you I've an axe and a foul temper, and I've drunk half a jug of Skullbuster." To knock on the door and tell the owner of the voice who you are, turn to one section. To sneak off and try to sleep in the woodshed, turn to another, or to try the barn, a third section. So I think we will just knock on the door, do the obvious thing. Don't particularly want to be woken up by a man with an axe first thing in the morning if I try and sleep in his farm buildings without so much as a bye or leave. There is a rattling and clattering and clunking of several locks being turned and bolts pulled back, and then the door opens a crack. You look down to see an angry dwarf with a thick red beard glaring up at you. "An acolyte on a quest, are you?" he says. "Better come in out of the rain." So picture of the dwarf is pretty good. Yeah, the clothing choices in this are really interesting. He looks like a proper farmer, outdoorsy type with sort of shirt and patched breeches. Yeah, I really like how Vlado Krizan designs a lot of his pictures. It's just I don't like the end result all that much because of the style. I mean, again, in the right circumstances, this style would be absolutely fine, but it's just not a good fit for fighting fantasy for me. But yeah, it's a really nicely conceived bit of art. You go in and the dwarf locks the door. The inside of the cottage is cramped but warm and dry. There's a fire in the grate and food and drink laid out on a rough oak table. "I'm Fossick the lumberjack," says the dwarf once he's secured the door and goes over to a table. "Have a cup of Skullbuster." Desperate for any food or drink, you take a sip and immediately regret it. Your head spins, your vision blurs, and your belly is filled with fire. You feel like someone is using your skull for a drum, and there's a horrible howling, moaning sound ringing in your ears. Amazing, it sounds like there's actually a spirit more unpleasant than Jägermeister. You sit at the table and wait for your head to clear. Soon the pain has been replaced by a soft, fuzzy glow, and you find yourself telling Fossick your whole story as if he were your oldest and dearest friend. He grows quiet the more you say, and busies himself with serving you a fine meal of bread and cheese and mushroom soup. Add 3 stamina points. Oh, sounds delicious. Stamina now 20. When you have finished telling your story, Fossick stares at you for a long time, tangling and untangling his fingers in his beard. Once again you hear that moaning sound and shake your head. Your guts rumble, and then there's a great thump. You wonder if it came from underground or from your belly. "I have something to tell you," Fossick says at last, clearing away your bowl. "My wife, Glossop, died 2 years back, and I've lived here alone with my daughter Blossom ever since. She's everything to me. I can't imagine life without her. But she recently fell ill, and when she woke from her fever, she was changed. She'd caught the demon plague, you see, and turned into one of them." There's a bang and a groan from under your feet. "You hear that?" says Fossick, leaning in closer. "That's her. I just managed to shut her in the cellar before she bit my head off. I don't know what to do, but perhaps the great goddess Throff sent you here to help me. If you can do something about Blossom, I'll reward you richly." Fossick nods towards a sturdy wooden chest. "I've treasure and magic potions in there," he says. "Deliver my darling Blossom from her misery, and they're yours. So you can offer him help, you can fight him for his treasure, or tell him you can't help him. I think we can help him. After all, he's doing a tribute to The Evil Dead, one of my favourite movies, where someone gets buried in the basement under an old wood house. So, yeah, let's offer our help. You're a good friend, says Fossick, giving you a big hug, and he goes over to push the heavy treasure chest to one side. You see that it has been sitting on a trapdoor set into the floor. Fossick unlocks the trapdoor, swings it up, and then lowers a lamp into the darkness on a string. You can hear horrible grunts and moans and can just see something moving about down there. Could it really be his daughter? You'll have to jump, says Fossick. I can't risk the ladder in case she gets out. Just remember, fix my Blossom and you'll be well looked after. Do you want to jump down into the cellar or change your mind? I will jump down into the cellar. I do think that maybe there's slightly too many sections where once you've decided to do something, you get more information and then get the chance to change your mind. I mean, I guess this is actually a significantly longer book than average. It's actually 470 sections long, so maybe it's actually fine in context. But it does feel like a couple of these have been extended for not no reason, but they've been extended perhaps more than they need to be. They're not the most tightly written encounters, and I am the last person who should be throwing stones at people for unnecessarily involved encounter design. Verily, I preach to myself first. But yeah, it does feel that the encounter design is maybe a little bit loose. Could perhaps have been tightened up. It's an incredibly minor criticism, because honestly, I'm enjoying this a very great deal. Steeling yourself, you jump down into the cellar. As you land, something moves in the shadows and there's a hissing, wheezing sound. You grab a lamp and hold it up. There stands Blossom. She's half your height, but the demon plague has made her look like some immense leathery toad. Her lips are thick and swollen, her eyes are dark, and claws extend from her fingers and toes. Wild, tangled red hair sticks straight out from her head in all directions. She smiles at you, showing a row of needle-like teeth, and burps. The smell is awful in this cramped space. It looks like she's been eating a pig. There's a pile of bones at her feet. She picks up its jawbone, the muscles standing out along her powerful-looking arms, and advances slowly, shaking her head from side to side. There's a picture of her. Again, really nicely conceived picture. She's got her head tilted to one side, one massive arm, one skinny arm, and a bit that I love is that there's a teddy bear stuffed into a rope belt, a sort of little nod to the young dwarf that she once was. We get a whole bunch of different choices. We can fight her, we can use a vial of smoke oil, we can try some magic potion, or we can ask Fossick to pull us up out of here. I think we'll use the smoke oil. Smash a bottle of smoke oil on the cellar floor and release its contents. Smoke oil now down to 8. The weird yellow gas finds its way to Blossom and shoots straight up her nose. She squeals and clutches her throat, falling to the floor where she writhes about, coughing and choking, purple smoke billowing out of her mouth. Finally, she goes into a back-breaking spasm, then becomes rigid as a plank of wood before giving a shriek and flopping in a heap. "What have you done to her?" shouts Fossick, who has been watching from the trapdoor. "If she's been harmed, I'll kill you." You go over to Blossom, fearing the worst, but see with relief that she's back to normal. You have rid Blossom of the demon spirit. She sits up, blinking and confused. "Well done," shouts Fossick from the trapdoor. "You've saved my beautiful Blossom. Come up and I'll give you your reward." He lowers down a ladder and you and Blossom climb up out of the cellar. Fossick hugs you both and leads you over to his treasure chest. "You can choose 3 things from in here," he says, and then waves his hands over a strange dragon-shaped lock while muttering a magic spell. Nunctus vibaris nostratum. The dragon's jaws widen and the lock clicks open. Inside you see all of Fossic's treasure. Choose any 3. A bag of 10 gold pieces, a jewelled warhammer, a death stone, a horn of plenty, a harp of healing, or a hero's medallion. We'll definitely take the jewelled warhammer. We want a weapon. Harp of healing sounds handy, as does a horn of plenty. Probably only want one of those 2. So we'll go with the horn of plenty. Warhammer, horn of plenty, and the hero's medallion. That sounds the most intriguing of the remaining items. So the jeweled warhammer allows us to fight normally, causing 2 points of damage, although it will cause 3 against demons. It's also particularly against creatures made of stone or crystal. If you make a successful strike against such a creature, it will suffer 4 points of damage instead. That's exciting.
Oh, you've chosen well, says Fossick. Some of these items can be used right now if you like. Let me tell you what they do.
And so the dwarf does just that. Now, we already heard about the jewelled warhammer. The death stone will drain your enemy's stamina by 5 points, but only 3 times. The horn of plenty will restore your stamina to its initial level. Very handy. You can use it at any time, but only once. And if you ever lose a fight, the harp of healing will restore 8 stamina points to you, but again, only once. For as long as you wear the hero's medallion, it will raise your skill score by 2 points. So that's very, very neat. So, Horn of Plenty. And this book, if I remember correctly, this book does not... Oh no, this book does state that your skill score can never exceed its initial value unless specifically instructed. So the Hero's Medallion will be handy if we ever lose any skill, but it does not increase our skill above 11, which is a shame because it's always fun when you manage to get your skill above 12, which is the maximum starting skill.
The medallion was given to me by a young adventurer who passed this way to pay for food and a bed, explains Fossick. And talking of beds, you look tired. You should stay the night and rest. But first, why not share another mug of Skullbuster with me to celebrate?
Do you want to ask about the adventurer, go straight to bed, or have another mug of Skullbuster? I think we'll ask about the adventurer.
Ah, yes, the adventurer, says Fossick. A brave young fellow he was, from the Icefinger Mountains to the far north, went by the name of Hikas Mandira. He came through here on his way to Trolltooth Pass, hoping to fight the demon plague. He said he knew just how to find the invisible city. Said he just needed to look for some magic items in the ancient burial grounds near Broken Goddess Fort. He was going to visit the mapmaker in Salamonis, Sandford Swan, to get the exact details. You should visit Swan yourself. If you pass through Salamis, his shop's just off the north road. So what's it to be, bed or a nightcap first?
So that's very handy clues. Do we want to have another mug of Skullbuster, or do we want to go straight to bed? I think we go straight to bed. My stamina is nearly full. I don't want a hangover. Fossick shows you to a bed tucked away in a back room. You crawl into it and instantly fall asleep, regain 2 stamina points. Stamina now back to its maximum. You wake to discover that Fossick and Blossom have made breakfast. You tuck into a fine meal of eggs and bacon. Restore another 3 stamina points.
I've a horse you can borrow, says Fossick. He's out in the barn. Give him his head and he'll take you as far as Salamis. He knows the way so well he could do it in his sleep, and he knows his way back, so just set him loose when you're done, and he'll come home. You go outside with Fossick and his daughter. Fossick unlocks his barn and shows you his horse. It doesn't take long to saddle the beast, and you're soon mounted and ready to leave. You wave to Fossick and Blossom, dig your heels into the horse's flanks, and canter off. This is going suspiciously well. You ride on through the trees, ducking to avoid low-hanging branches. The horse is strong and fast, and it's not long before you come to the edge of the woods. It's faster going in open country, but more exposed, and you spot several demons hunting in the fields. The horse wants to go in one direction, along a path it's obviously taken many times before. To give the horse its head and let it go where it wants, you can go to one section. To take the reins and steer it in another direction, you can go to another. So I think we will trust the horse.
It knows where it's going. You ride hard, not even risking stopping for food, following the horse's lead, and arrive at Salamonis as the sun is dipping in the sky. You sit there, picking flies out of your teeth and looking up at the high city walls of Salamonis. They must have stood here for hundreds of years and seen countless people come and go. They're built from massive blocks of ancient weathered stone, and they look like they could hold back an army of giants. You look down to where the road passes through them and are surprised to see nobody guarding the gates. Do you want to explore the area outside the walls or enter through the gates? Let us have an explore. You dismount and let the horse return to Fossick in the woods before walking along the bottom of the Great Wall. Soon you come to a group of low buildings. With no more room inside the city, the citizens of Salamonis have had to build new houses out here, huddled hard against the wall. You have only just begun to explore this little village when you see bodies lying in the dirt. There has obviously been a battle of some sort here. You go over for a closer look. The bodies have been horribly clawed and bitten. This must be the work of demons. You will need to be extra careful from now on. You can see someone's pack lying half buried under a broken cart. You pull it out and add its contents to your own. Add the following to your equipment list: a meal of dried dates that will add 3 stamina points whenever you choose to eat them, a purse of 3 gold pieces, and a jar of healing ointment. So we're up to 11 gold pieces. That is good news indeed. It feels risky here outside the city walls. You hurry back to the gates and then carry on through. You find a small square on the other side with a customs house, an inn, and a stable block. There is no sign of life, apart from a familiar black carriage that has stopped by the customs house. The driver is attending to the horses and watches warily as you dismount and knock the dust from your clothing. Have we seen a black carriage, or are we just familiar with black carriages in general? I think that's a small error. I don't think we've seen this black carriage before. No, I don't think we've seen it. So this is Salamonis. There are many grand houses lining the streets with red-tiled roofs and shady porches, but the whole place seems oddly deserted. You feel a drop of rain on your face and look up to see clouds forming over the city. They don't look at all like normal clouds. They're swirling and purple, and the rain that falls from them is purple too. Soon the road is stained and wet. There is a great evil in the world. You turn to see Lady Webspin getting down from the black carriage. She stares at you for a moment and then walks over. "Purple rain means that somewhere close there is a demon portal," she continues. "Some powerful being is working its evil. You know the old rhyme. I want to cause you sorrow, I want to cause you pain, I want to see you drowning in the purple rain." Is that a Prince reference? They say that if you are sucked into a demon portal, you need to chant the words Exitus, Exodus, Exitus. As she recites the spell, Lady Webspin shivers and takes your hand. I feel as though I've missed something. Am I supposed to have met this woman before? "I feel terribly alone here," she says. "Where is everybody? My maidservant Lyra is too sick to leave the carriage, and I need to find help for her. Will you walk with me and keep me safe? I'm going to the halls of learnings in the hope that the scholars there have found out exactly what is causing the demon plague." You look away down the street, which is the main west road into the town. The buildings on either side have their shutters closed, and many of the doors have been boarded up. With its ancient high walls and reputation for learning, you expected Salamonis to feel safe and civilized. Instead, it feels cold and threatening. Do you want to accompany Lady Webspin to the halls of learning, or tell her you're going to forge your own path and bid her farewell? Let's go with her to the halls of learning. You and Lady Webspin walk down the wide west road. You hear a noise and look to your right to see a group of demons lurking in an alleyway. "It's not safe to be out in the open," says Lady Webspin. "Take this, it will protect you." She hands you a silver ring with an image of a 6-pointed star on it, and you slip it on. Instantly, you feel a wave of energy and strength pass through you. Add 3 stamina points. "I had hoped a plague hadn't got into Salamonis,"
says Lady Webspin. Luckily, I know a secret passageway that will get us off the streets and straight into the halls of learning. Follow me. Lady Webspin leads you over the north side of the road where some steps lead down into a courtyard. Do you want to go with her? I do indeed. You hear a demon howl in the road behind you and race down the steps 3 at a time. At the bottom is a small courtyard. On the wall ahead of you is a bronze plaque depicting the trickster god Logan in the form of a crazed clown with a 6-pointed star symbol on his chest. To your left is another row of steps leading down. That 6-pointed star symbol sounds like it might be a clue of sorts. Several demons are climbing down the steps towards you. They were once the civilized citizens of Salamonis. They're well dressed. You can see bankers, bakers, butchers, builders, merchants, washerwomen, fine ladies. Or at least that's what they were before the plague came into town and changed them. Now they have the wrinkled leathery skin and the dark eyes of demonkind that you've come to know so well. Are you wearing a silver ring? I am indeed. We must hurry. Lady Webspin goes over to the wall plaque, murmurs some words, places her hand on the 6-headed arrow symbol on Logan's chest, and presses. There's a click and a section of the wall slides back to reveal an opening. You can just make out a long narrow passageway on the other side. It's dark and smells of rotting meat. Do you want to follow her into the passageway? Sure, in for a penny, in for a pound. You hurry into the passageway and Lady Webspin closes the door just before the demons get to it. For a moment it's pitch dark and you can see nothing. Then there's a spark and a flare of flame as Lady Webspin lights a lamp. Come, she says, moving quickly along the passageway, which twists and turns, sometimes going up, sometimes down, and the further you go, the stronger the smell of rotting meat becomes. I have to tell you, says Lady Webspin, I am from Salamonis. I'm a scholar at the halls of learning here. I travelled to Port Blacksand to look for the wizard Nicodemus and see if he might know how to combat the plague. But the city was too dangerous and I had to get out before I found him. When I left here only 10 days ago, my city was unaffected, but now... Ugh. Lady Webspin suddenly stops. Step carefully, she says. You see a dead soldier on the floor, showing all the signs of having been attacked by demons. This isn't good, says Lady Webspin. If the demons have got into the halls of learning, there may be no hope for Alanzia. I thought this would be a safe place. It seems I may have been wrong. There's another passageway here that will take you straight to Titan Square, the heart of Salamonis. Go that way if you wish. The passageway forks here. Do you want to say goodbye to Lady Webspin and go to Titan Square, or carry on with her to the halls of learning? Well, I think this is a good a point as any to call a halt to proceedings. It's very exciting. I'm really looking forward to finding out how the rest of this story unfolds. It feels quite easy, I will say, in the opening stages. I don't know whether that's an illusion. Sometimes there's a progress check later on that reveals that you really needed to be exploring in a very, very specific way, but it doesn't feel particularly dangerous. And we haven't had a single fight in the entire recorded playthrough, and that's incredibly unlikely in a fighting fantasy book. So there's clearly some interesting design work going on there as well. I'm going to go away. I'm going to play through this on my own time. I will be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. First up, I think there's still some issues with the audio, for which I apologise. I'm still trying to get the best out of the new mobile studio, and it's very much a work in progress. All being well, the next episode should be going out from the Doom Industries HQ studio, so hopefully it'll only sound as rubbish as it normally does. Secondly, I continued the fine Fantastic Fights tradition by dying shortly after pausing the recording. While exploring Salamonis, I zigged when I should have zagged and fell into the sewers where I was eaten by a horde of demonic townsfolk. It felt pretty arbitrary, if I'm honest, but we'll look at that more closely in a moment.
It's notable that I hadn't had even a single fight during that entire playthrough. I think this might be unprecedented to get so deep into a fighting fantasy book on a first playthrough without needing to punch anyone in the face. But given how many episodes I've done at this point and my sketchy memory for my own life, I wouldn't like to swear to it. Is Gates of Death any good? That's a complicated question to answer, and I think I'm going to have to chicken out by saying yes and no. It's got some amazing ideas, but also some deep and obvious flaws. What it ultimately felt like to me was a really good first draft of something that needed to be vigorously edited to turn it into the finished article. I think I'd lean on the side of thinking that there was more good than bad, but there are a lot of issues, a couple of which functionally break the gamebook. Badly edited, even by the standards of late period fighting fantasy, is really quite the accolade, but here we are. In broad strokes, the overall narrative is fairly strong. You've got a classic save the world story, which does feel quite nostalgic at this point. A demonic force attempting to return to the material plane with a host of monsters in order to conquer the world, and only you can stop it. That is some old school fighting fantasy stuff right there. Within that, you've got a loose 3-act structure, which encompasses the opening at Port Blacksand, a trip through the demon-haunted ruins of Salamonis, and finally, a mysterious temple in the Invisible City, in which you will traverse the Gates of Death and deal with a deadly threat once and for all. There's a few different paths you can take from Blacksand to Salamonis, and all 3 locations offer a decent amount of choice in terms of how you approach them. Port Blacksand is probably the most narrative of the locations, in that you can take 2 main routes and there's no crossover between them. I chose to take the route that involves meeting with Nicodemus, but there's also an alternative path in which you get taken prisoner by Lord Azur and his evil cronies. There's a nice bit of plotting in that Lord Azur also wants you to save the world. He might be a thoroughly despicable tyrant, but he's not stupid, and has no more desire to see the world destroyed by the demon plague than anyone else. And it's a really nice alternative to just hanging out with yet another of Alanzia's slightly smug but very lazy master wizards, and it makes much more sense that someone as evil as Lord Azur would be keen to ensure that someone else is taking all the risks. He'll also give you a magical khopesh, one of the many weapons you can find in the book, and this is a good segue into talking about the use of redundancy in this book, because I think it's quite interesting. Azur's khopesh is an item you absolutely need to beat the game, but it's actually one of a pair, the second one being located on the main path towards the end of the book, so you cannot help but find it. There's also a potion that's required, and you'll be positively tripping over potions by the time you reach the finale, because it seems like everyone in Alanzia is going around with their pockets stuffed with the same 4 exact potions for some reason. Similarly, there's some vital clues you need for exploring Salamonis that you can tumble over in multiple different places. On the one hand, I like that this keeps the difficulty manageable, but that's something that cuts both ways. I was delighted to find the khopesh on my successful playthrough, and it was a little deflating to discover that there was a second one just dropped into my lap. I felt the same about the clues for Salamonis. Finding them in several places dragged some of the fun out of finding them in the first place. It's a very difficult balance to strike between making your gamebook approachable and making winning feel like an achievement, and sometimes Gates of Death slips into holding your hand a little too tightly for my liking. There is some challenge to be found in here though. Salamonis is actually quite tough until you get the measure of it. Take a wrong turn and it's very easy to wind up dead. You need to find a few key pieces of information to get to the map maker and out the other side of the doomed city. And this brings us to another interesting element in the design, which is the use of loops. This, too, is something of a mixed bag. You can explore Salamonis and the Temple of Throth more or less how you wish, but that means that there's plenty of areas you can visit multiple times. Sometimes this works well, and sometimes it doesn't. Added to this, there's a number of items that can save your life by returning you to an earlier point in the adventure when you would have otherwise have died, and this adds further loops into the game. From a design perspective, this works fairly well, but from a narrative perspective, things can get odd. There's NPCs you can meet repeatedly and have the exact same conversation, and you can actually kill the dwarf Fossick as many times as you like, which is definitely a problem for making the world feel real. It winds up often feeling more like a MMORPG such as World of Warcraft than a traditionally structured narrative. I think how much of a problem you have with this is a matter of personal taste. For me, it happens so frequently that it almost stops mattering. The illusion of a persistent world is so thoroughly broken that I did end up treating it much more like a video game. It's ultimately a consequence of two different design philosophies coming together, and it being impossible to fully satisfy both sets of requirements. Gates of Death is trying to keep things relatively simple, mechanically speaking. This is a book that's clearly aimed at younger readers, and that's a perfectly reasonable decision to make. However, the various loops make certain demands that could only be properly resolved through adding complexity. If you were writing this book outside of fighting fantasy, you could resolve the loop issue by tracking the outcome of encounters through the use of keywords. If you kill Fossick, then when you return, that triggers a keyword that ensures you only find his body. Similarly, the traveller Lady Webspin would track whether you've met her before you run into her in Salamonis. There's two issues with this, the first being that it adds a significant amount of bookkeeping to proceedings. When I'm playing an open world book, I do tend to find it a little frustrating that I often have to refer to my character sheet almost every section to check for keywords. It slows the action down and breaks up the flow of the narrative, and it makes it harder to simply enjoy the story being told. We have seen heavy use of keywords in fighting fantasy, but not, I think, on the kind of scale that would potentially be needed here. The second issue is that this is something that is very hungry in terms of section count. Now, that's not a problem in something like The Steam Highwayman, where the author is happy to have 800 plus sections in their book, and it's a book which is definitely aimed at an experienced hobbyist. I think it's a bigger problem with a fighting fantasy book, which generally likes to keep the section count under control, especially with the books for younger readers. There's really no way to properly reconcile all these competing demands with the structure the author has chosen. Basically, ignoring the problem isn't actually the worst idea in the world. I think I'd have probably used an item as a keyword to try and deal with the biggest issue, which is being able to redo Fossick the Dwarf over and over again. If you go back after you've done him once, regardless of what you did, I'd have the cottage empty or burned down or something like that. I'd also make meeting Lady Webspin mandatory at some point, which would deal with the awkward bit where she greets you like an old friend in Salamonis, even if you haven't come across her before. I think I'd stick the mandatory meeting with her outside Port Blacksand or even in Port Blacksand, likely replacing the beggar, who doesn't really add a great deal to the plot. I then wouldn't worry too much about the other loops and being able to repeat encounters, sacrificing a bit of immersion for the sake of simplicity. It would still feel odd, but you'd deal with the most egregious problems that this design throws up. And these are the design decisions that I find most fascinating, where you've got competing interests that are basically impossible to reconcile, and you have to find a way that works best for you. It's like the challenge of creating a video game for old hardware. I remember playing a relatively recent game made for the venerable Nintendo Entertainment System, where the designers managed to work around the tight memory limits and double the length of the levels by having the second half of each level be the mirror image of the first, which then informed how they designed each screen so that it could be played through in two directions and provide a different challenge. I think it's the limitations that always interest me most in gamebook design, and fighting fantasy falls right into the sweet spot where there's enough mechanical complexity to experiment, but you can't just throw sections and mechanics at problems until you brute force your way past them. And I think I would come down harder on Gate of Death's loops if it wasn't for the final section. Salamonis feels like a bit of a slog because there's death round every corner if you don't do everything just right, but the Temple of Throth is honestly a delight. It's got two wings, one dark and one light, and it feels a lot more open to just wandering around looking for clues and magic items. It's a lovely space to rummage through, and there's a bunch of NPCs who each provide a valuable clue about some hoops you're going to need to jump through before you traverse the Gates of Death themselves. This is by far the strongest actual design in the whole book. For example, you'll be told you need to find a book in the library, but once you have it, you need to find a fish-headed NPC to help you translate it. Working your way back and forth through the temple, gradually uncovering all the different bits of the jigsaw puzzle, was wonderful. I didn't find it at all oppressive, and there was a tremendous sense of accomplishment once I'd done everything and was ready to head to the demon realm to face the final boss. And actually, quite a lot of the stuff you do in the temple is strictly speaking optional, but it does feel much more satisfying if you get all of the relevant parts. I'm always a lot more forgiving of errors when I can see there was a larger purpose at play, and that's definitely the case with the final act of the adventure. And it does help that the Demon Realm itself feels like a suitably epic conclusion to the adventure, though one marred by several howlers that break the gamebook completely if you stick to the letter of the rules. There's a lovely bit of business where in order to traverse the gates of death, you need to actually die, and that means you actually need to lose the fight with the Guardians of the Gate in order to progress. Rather than giving you the option to deliberately lose, which would kind of give the game away, instead you can take a potion of weakness, which drops your skill to 2, making it likely that the Guardians will kill you. The Guardians will reform after the battle, so even if you win, you can go round and have another go. I like this because aside from reminding you that potions are a thing, the section drops no hint that you actually want to lose that battle, and it makes knowing the secret to progressing feel really impactful. Once you get through that, you need to face the toughest opponent in the history of fighting fantasy, a demon horde with a whopping 400 skill and 800 stamina. By this point, however, you've got a whole bunch of items that will help you knock those stats down to something much more manageable. Indeed, if you've been abusing the loops, you may well have enough magic to reduce their stats to almost nothing. It's an awesome set piece though, and defeating an entire horde of demons makes you feel like a proper hero. Then there's just a small matter of defeating Ulrikar, the Demon Queen. This too is pretty fun. It involves you turning the Demon Queen back into her original form of a beautiful young woman before then stabbing her repeatedly in the face to close out the adventure in fine style. The problem is that none of this actually works. When you find the Book of the Dead, it tells you that the only thing you can take through the portal is the Khopesh, and when you do pass through the portal, you do so in the form of a spirit that then possesses a body on the other side. This creates a problem, in that in order to be able to fight Ulrikar, you need to be wearing some magic boots, which is tricky given that they're still attached to your corpse on the other side of the portal. Awkward, and certainly game-breaking, although I did find a very lively discussion on the Fighting Fantasy message board trying to find a way of reading the text that didn't break the game, with lots of interesting points raised on both sides. I don't think you actually need to read the Book of the Dead to go through the Gates of Death, and there's no actual rules text in the description of crossing the gates that says to remove everything from your character sheet, though being told that you're turning into a disembodied spirit strongly suggests you aren't going to be going through the gate with a suitcase and hand luggage. You basically have to ignore this in order to beat the game. The problems are compounded by taking the potion of weakness to get the Guardians to kill you. On the other side of the portal, you are told to restore your stamina to its initial level, but no mention is made of your skill. This means that you'll be facing the final battle with Ulrikar with a skill of 2. That's not really going to be able to cut it against her skill of 10. But there are actually a couple of fun ways round this. Given that you need to ignore the book as written in order to take the vital boots through the gates of death, you can further ignore the effects of being disembodied and take a few death stones with you, which can be used to finish off both the demonic horde and Ulrikar herself. The other option, which is very clever, involves repeatedly drinking from a poisoned well which will drain a single point of stamina. You can use this and other tricks to reduce your stamina to 1 when you face the Guardians. Even with their skill of 6, if you fight them barehanded, they only need to win a single attack round to kill you, and this lets you preserve your skill into the final stretch. This is a really, really neat bit of hacking the game, and I tip my hat to the folk on the Fighting Fantasy message boards for such incredibly detailed analysis. I wish I'd come up with it myself. And these problems are symptomatic of the lack of care shown across the whole book. There's just this litany of small, annoying errors sprinkled over the whole thing, and it's surprising that it doesn't create more friction than it does. I had to laugh at the warning that only the pure in heart can find the priestess of Throth, because it's entirely possible by the time you run across the cleric in question, you've murdered Fossick the dwarf for literally no reason, possibly many times over, making you an oddly specific mass murderer. I think if the book was hard, it would have felt a lot more oppressive, but as it is, the general vibe is of something ramshackle that's fundamentally kind of going to turn out okay in the end. Looking back at my notes, I'm astonished that I didn't feel more negativity towards Gates of Death, but it was very much at the sweet rather than sour end of incompetence for me. I think it's well written, although in a way that highlights the changes in children's literature over the last 40 years. There's a silliness to the prose that may rub older gamers up the wrong way, lots of stuff in the bums and farts and wee genre. Now, I may be as joyless and serious-minded as the next middle-aged gamer, taking this stuff far too seriously, but I'm not too proud to admit that I did do a little giggle at the bum-faced monster. If I was going to try and style it out, I'd mutter something about this being in the lineage of Hieronymus Bosch and scurrilous medieval manuscript illuminations, but I'm honest enough to admit it's more that my inner 5-year-old is never that far from the surface. I've always been clear that for me, fighting fantasy books should be children's books first and foremost, but I do think the best fighting fantasy books have that timeless appeal where they can truly be said to be for children of all ages. I found Gates of Death charming at points, and I think Charlie Higson's core descriptive style is a good fit for the series, but I do think it's interesting to reflect on the more conscious, flippant tone and how it can be seen as indicative of broader changes within pop culture media. When Warlock of Firetop Mountain was written, the broader pop culture ambience surrounding role-playing was notably serious. The caricature of a role-player was some spotty oik who cared way too much about their character and had little, if any, sense of humour. Dungeons and Dragons was a serious business, in conception, if not in reality. Because, of course, the reality was always much sillier than this. A game of Dungeons and Dragons has always involved a lot more laughter than the rules and supplementary material might have suggested, because it's always been a bunch of friends having fun together, even if the campaign itself has theoretically serious themes and mechanics. What I think has changed in the 21st century is that nerd culture has broadened enormously and been absorbed by wider pop culture. Someone playing Warlock of Firetop Mountain in the 80s might have seen Ralph Bakshi's animated Lord of the Rings movie, or perhaps Kull or Hawk the Slayer. Someone playing Gates of Death in 2026 is more likely to have seen the Dungeons and Dragons movie Honor Among Thieves. A film I absolutely loved, but which is drawing on what you might loosely call post-Avengers themes and tropes. And I think now there is an expectation that heroes will always have a quip to hand, and there will be broad comedy, even if it's existing alongside a serious tone. I think this makes it harder to write things that are truly timeless, because nothing dates faster than humour unless you're P.G. Wodehouse, who somehow managed to write timeless humour by creating comedy based on a world that was already fading by the start of his career and was completely gone from the world by the end. None of this means you have to like the style of Gates of Death, of course, but I think there's value in reflecting on how we got here and why it might have seemed like the obvious way to write the book to an experienced children's author in 2018. In a couple of episodes, we'll be looking at a book by Rhianna Pratchett, who has mostly written for video games. Again, that's something that's changed enormously since the 80s, and again, I'll be looking to see if I can detect any evidence of that in her approach to a game book. Personally, I like my books more serious than Gates of Death, because that's the cultural milieu that I grew up in. But at the same time, I do think this brings something fresh to the table, which is nice to see in a series as venerable as Fighting Fantasy. I think that just about wraps this one up. Gates of Death is frustrating in parts, but I think the finale is strong enough to make it worth your time. It's probably not much more than a footnote in the history of fighting fantasy, but it is a curious and at times compelling footnote, and it was genuinely nice to see a new author tackle the genre. It's also pleasantly baffling to be reviewing a book written by one of the guys behind the Fast Show. That wouldn't have been on my bingo card of future projects for Charlie Higson when I was watching him on TV in the mid-90s. Don't forget you can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledging as little as a single £1 or local equivalent in exchange for a whole bunch of things I've written. You can get in touch with me via email on hjdoomretrofun, or one word, at gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at HJDoom. Next time, I'm hoping to feature a digital game book recommended to me by a listener, so that's going to be something to look forward to. Thanks very much for listening, take care, and I'll see you soon.